Millionaires. We should probably have a very focused pledge drive, but that's not up to me, Bernard. I'm just here to host Week in Review.
I guess it's up to me then.
It really is.
Any millionaires listening right now, please make a contribution at KUOW.org/donate.
Thank you for making the call.
Support for KUOW's car donation program comes from local Kia dealers, presenting the all-electric Kia EV9 with up to 379 horsepower and an EPA estimated range of 304 miles. More at kia.com.
Hi, I'm Chris Morgan, host of The Wild. On our next episode, we head deep into California's redwood forests to experience the awe and majesty of the tallest trees on Earth and the connection that local indigenous people share. We'll learn about the biodiversity of this unique ecosystem and how scientists are trying to save these ancient forests by cutting trees down. Listen to The Wild tonight at 8 or wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for KUOW comes from Legacy Forest Defense Coalition, with a mission to protect Western Washington's oldest remaining lowland forests. Learn how the coalition's legal efforts are helping to protect and conserve natural heritage at WLFDC.org.
A sunny day in Seattle. We've reached 70 degrees on our way to an expected high of 75. Looks like a clear sky tonight with a low in the mid-50s. Tomorrow, mostly sunny with a high of 79. It's 12:01.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Hunter Biden's daughter Naomi took the stand for the defense today in her father's trial on gun charges in Delaware. Hunter Biden is charged with lying about his drug use when he bought a gun in October of 2018. Here's NPR's Ryan Lucas.
With her father at the defense table and her grandmother, First Lady Jill Biden, watching from the front row, Naomi Biden was on the stand for less than an hour. She told jurors she saw her father in August of 2018, around 2 months before he bought the gun at the center of this trial. He was doing rehab, and she said he seemed great. But on cross-examination, she acknowledged she knew her father struggled with addiction, but said she never saw him use drugs and wouldn't be able to tell if he was using them. After she stepped down from the stand, Hunter Biden gave his daughter a hug as she left the courtroom. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, outside the federal courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware.
Still under a cloud of conflict of interest concerns, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's latest financial disclosure report includes 2 luxury trips paid for by a GOP megadonor in 2019. According to the report, Thomas says information was inadvertently omitted at the time of filing. It lists Thomas and his wife as Harlan Crow's guests during a trip to Bali. Justice Thomas acknowledges he was also Crow's guest at a private club in California. The report was filed in mid-May but publicly disclosed today. A temporary pier the U.S. military built to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza is reconnected to the beach in the Palestinian territory where civilians have been starving. Here's NPR's Tom Bowman.
The pier was operational starting May 17th, but was only moving humanitarian aid for a little over a week before a severe storm caused the pier to break apart. Pieces of the pier were towed to an Israeli port for repairs. Now ships loaded with aid from Cyprus are expected to arrive at the pier in the coming days, officials said, and then trucks will move from the pier along a causeway to the beach.
That's NPR's Tom Bowman reporting. Federal investigators are calling for more safety technology in response to a growing number of close calls on runways across the United States. NPR's Joel Rose reports that's one of the recommendations approved at a meeting this week.
The National Transportation Safety Board says an air traffic controller's mistake led to a near collision of 2 jets on a foggy runway in Austin, Texas last year. Jennifer Homendy, the chair of the NTSB, says critical safety technology might have prevented that incident and others.
The somber truth is it only takes one. One missed warning, one incorrect response can lead to tragedy.
Homendy is calling for more surface detection technology so that air traffic controllers and pilots can know the precise location of planes on the ground. There have been more close calls on runways across the country in recent years, including one just last week. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Katie Sewell in Seattle. Two high-profile Republicans in Washington are suing the state to prevent it from telling voters how much 3 ballot initiatives will cost. Olympia correspondent Jeannie Lindsay reports the lawsuit is being heard in court today.
Many Republicans want to repeal the state's capital gains tax and make the WA-CARES payroll tax completely optional. They also want to repeal Washington's carbon emissions auction program, calling it a, quote, hidden gas tax. This November, voters will decide whether or not they agree. And under a 2022 law, the state has to spell out for voters how tax-related initiatives could affect state funding and services. But now, 2 Republicans are suing to prevent that financial disclosure from appearing on voters' ballots. They argue in part that the measures are not technically taxes. A judge could rule on the case as early as this afternoon. I'm Jeannie Lindsay in Olympia.
Classes are canceled today and Monday at Garfield High School in Seattle after a deadly shooting there yesterday. A 17-year-old Garfield student died after being shot while trying to break up a fight. The shooter has not been found. Seattle police say they will remain present at the school today and in the neighborhood. Sue Rahr is Seattle's interim police chief.
The Seattle Police Department is going to redouble our efforts in this community to try and help the students and the people who live up here to feel a sense of safety. I know that's going to be very hard.
Rahr and Mayor Harrell say the goal is not to over-police, but to support the community. Harrell appointed Rahr to replace Adrian Diaz while the city undertakes a national search for the next permanent police chief. And a Garfield High School parent, who was one of the first people to give aid to a student who was shot and killed yesterday, says her son will not be returning to school.
But I'm just not comfortable sending my son. It doesn't seem like they're equipped to handle situations like this. And this is like the 3rd or 4th shooting they've had this year.
You can read and listen to her full account online at KUOW.org. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations and from your part-time controller, U.S.-based staff helping nonprofits with their accounting, from bookkeeping to financial reporting and analysis to CFO services. YPTC.com/NPR. This is NPR.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. How should Washington politicians handle national politics like Biden's border order and Trump's Trumpiness? We're going to discuss that and the rest of the week's news with my panel today. Freelance writer, editor Sarah Anne Lloyd. Welcome back, Sarah.
Thank you.
Freelance journalist and writer of the Playdate column in The Stranger, Nathalie Graham. Welcome back.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. And political analyst and contributing columnist Joni Balter. Welcome back, Joni.
Good to see you all.
And you can see us because we stream the show on YouTube. Just search KUOW, and you'll see how visually fetching we are. So I hope you can join us. We've got a lot to talk about this week. Unfortunately, here we are again with a shooting to tell you about, a fatal shooting in the school parking lot of Seattle's Garfield High School yesterday. Seattle police say a 17-year-old student tried to break up a fight in the school parking lot, and someone shot him at what appears to be close range and ran away. They're still looking for the shooter. There is a history of shootings around Garfield. A 17-year-old girl was shot in March at a bus station nearby. Last fall, there was an off-campus shooting after some incidents involving students. There were 3 shootings near Garfield last June, not involving students. Garfield parent Karen Emmerman Masner is angry and anguished. Her son is a senior at Garfield. She told KUOW reporter Kate Walters what happened yesterday.
I got texts from my son during the day and since the lockdown that were the kind no parent wants to get. I love you, Mom. I don't know what's going on. I hope I don't get shot. These are not the kinds of texts that you want to get.
She says while she was texting with her son, her husband was listening to the police scanner.
And I just felt so terrified and powerless. You want to tell your children everything's going to be okay, but you have no idea if everything's going to be okay. So instead you're saying things like, is the door locked? Are you on the floor? Are you away from the windows? Is everybody quiet in the room? for God's sake, don't try to leave the building. And it's just so like your whole world stops, and that becomes everything, like everything that's going on, and you just wait and wait and wait until you can get your kid home. And it's horrible. He said people were running and screaming in the building. And he just is so upset. He's absolutely shredded about this student who got shot. And he just eventually just lay down on the floor with his face on the rug. And I just sat there and rubbed his back. And he just said, I can't with this. It's too much. It's too much.
After the bus stop shooting in March, Karen had helped organize protests asking for more safety measures. And she says the district has done nothing to make her son safer.
This is probably maybe the 8th time I've had to have this kind of an exchange with him. And it's a terrible thing to say, a regular part of our lives. But compared to other people I know, it is a regular part of our lives. And every day when I send my kid to school, I kiss him on the cheek and I say to myself, God, I hope it's not today. Every single day.
Garfield has canceled classes today and Monday, but Karen wants the school closed for the rest of the year. Her son is a graduating senior and she doesn't ever want him in that building again.
I'm actually just sitting here terrified at the prospect of him telling me he wants to go back to the building. I don't want him anywhere near that building anymore. And I don't want anyone anywhere near that building. My kid, your kid, anyone's teacher, anyone's spouse, anyone's sister, anyone's grandchild. I don't want anyone near that building anymore. They cannot keep people safe there.
Some community members have asked for 23rd Avenue to be shut down certain hours while school is in session. Some people want more police officers and or security officers. Some say armed, some say unarmed. Some want more school-based programming from groups like Community Passageways. I've not seen any announcements from the school yet today. There's a lot going on there. The mayor of Seattle says he's directed the Seattle Police Department to enhance patrols around the school. Any reaction? Joni, I know you to be a Garfield parent yourself.
Yeah, and my children loved being in that building, and it's so sad to hear how traumatized these folks are. Feels to me largely like a failure of adults. I mean, I'm not going to blame one thing or the other because that's just too easy, but what about the Seattle schools getting rid of the schools resource officers? They were there.
Was this during the Black Lives Matter reckoning?
Seattle,
there was a rethinking of whether we want armed officers or even unarmed officers in school.
It was the connection to the actual police department. Seattle Public Schools passed a resolution, I believe, in 2020, saying we're not going to do this anymore. It makes the schools feel weird in a different way, like there's too much authority or officers looking them over. But, in any conversation like this, it's clearly about the guns. There are too many guns. We all know that. We can say that over and over again. But these students, as the mayor said, I watched that press conference, they are traumatized. The parents, as you're hearing here, so traumatized. We got to do better for students as a community. And I just worry when we say we asked Seattle Public Schools to fix this. The Seattle Public School District is having so many other problems. They're thinking of closing all these elementary schools. That just doesn't sound like they're going to be able to do it themselves.
Yeah, it strikes me as definitely a systemic problem and maybe not something that one security guard or multiple security guards could fix. I know that our young people right now have been going through school with this threat of school shootings nationally hanging over their head through a pandemic. There's a loneliness epidemic. Like there's a lot going on that I think, obviously guns are an issue. And even in Washington, which has really good gun reform policies, something's going on. And I mean, is that there's not enough access to the school therapist, which, yeah, maybe SPS could add in some more therapy there. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something that's unmet that's happening with our students.
Yeah, I mean, I think that access to school therapy would be fantastic. I remember when I was in Seattle Public Schools in the early mid 2000s, there was a strong therapy program that got cut my senior year, and I was very upset because I used it. I'm not really sure of the prevalence of it today. Education's not really my beat right now, but I think that would be just anything that can help students feel more welcome and more supported. Wouldn't be, the one thing that would solve everything, but I think that it would help.
Are we entirely sure that the shooter in this case, they keep saying this was high school aged,
yeah.
But I couldn't tell if it was a student.
I don't think we know yet. And to my knowledge, they haven't found him yet.
Not as we're doing this show live
Okay.
on Friday, no.
Yeah, and it's also just hard to discuss the issues at play before we know who did the shooting and what the motivation was and what influences there were.
Right. You know, when a high school student is fatally shot on his school campus, it's going to get a lot of attention, especially in the heart of Seattle at Garfield, a school that has seen multiple shootings, as I said. This KUOW listener called us with another point to make.
I was a little upset this morning. I heard the story about the Garfield shooting, but there was no mention of the teenager who was killed in Renton just 2 days ago. I just thought that they were both kind of similarly important.
So this was a 17-year-old killed outside a Renton sporting goods store on Wednesday. Some witnesses told police he was returning a paintball-style pellet gun. And the suspect told police he thought the kid was about to commit a robbery. But anyway, so many shootings.
Well, then definitely get the gun out, just to based on a thought.
Yeah. We also had a shooting within the last few months. There was a kid that got shot at Southwest Community Center across from South. And there's just been, I go there for swim lessons with my daughter, and you just see this memorial that's just been there the whole time, just gradually dwindling, just showing how long it's been before, since that happened, and, almost literally watching it fade from memory.
And that's what's happened. We almost forget the one at Ingram. How long ago was that? I don't remember, but it was within the last 2 years.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's those are some pretty recent developments yesterday. This, as we said, as far as we know, during this taping, the police are looking for a suspect in that Garfield shooting. Yes, Jim.
Could I just add one quick thing? Is we used to have something called the Youth Violence Prevention Council, and it might not be a bad idea to go see what those folks were doing if we're seeing such an increase.
Okay, why don't we take a little break here, and then we'll get back. We're going to start in on some politics, how our local politics interacts with the national, international scene. We've got a lot of news to discuss on Week in Review. Quick break, and we'll be right back.
.949 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:18. 70 degrees in Seattle, on our way to a high of 75. Sunny is today's forecast. Sunny is also tomorrow's forecast, with an expected high on Saturday of 79. Sunday, at least partly sunny, with a high of 72.
Support for KUOW comes from Washington's working foresters, who manage, harvest, and replant Washington's working forests to provide a sustainable supply of carbon-friendly wood products. Learn more at workingforesters.org. And from Archbright, offering virtual and in-person training on supervision, management, communication, and collaboration. Available for individual enrollment or as private team trainings. Details at archbright.com.
You are listening, perhaps watching, to KUOW's Week in Review. We're live streaming on YouTube, and I'm Bill Radke, sitting here in the studio with political analyst Joni Balter, with freelance writer of the Playdate column and others. Nathalie Graham is here, and freelance writer, editor Sarah Anne Lloyd. We're talking about the news of the week. And this week, President Biden used an executive order to suspend asylum for people who cross the border illegally. The rule is triggered when border arrests top 2,500 per day. The first deportations have already begun. You might think that Seattle's Democratic Congress members would be united in their umbrage. So why did KUOW politics reporter Scott Greenstone tell us that Democrats are split?
Democrat Pramila Jayapal, who represents much of Seattle, compared the president's order to Trump-era restrictions.
This is not going to do anything to address Republicans who are trying to demonize immigrants and, try to make this into an election issue. This is a mistake that, unfortunately, Democrats have made too many times. We try to out-Republican the Republicans on immigration.
Congressman Adam Smith represents the rest of Seattle. He said the order is not a lasting solution, but Biden has little choice.
No other president, Democrat or Republican, has faced this incredible, overwhelming volume of asylum seekers.
So what Adam Smith didn't quite say is that this is a lot about politics. Joni, you're a veteran political reporter. Is Pramila Jayapal, Congressmember Jayapal, correct that it is a mistake politically for Democrats to try to out-Republican the Republicans on immigration?
I guess that's a great line for the Congresswoman to say. She happens to be from one of the safest congressional districts in the country, so most of the other people are talking about this both in terms of policy and in terms of politics. And in terms of politics, what do you think the Democrats need to do right now? There's an election coming up, and President Biden and many folks on the ballot would be absolutely creamed if they didn't respond to the huge numbers at the borders. So you get an executive order. Is it perfect? No, it's terrible to have to do it that way. Everybody wanted the legislation, but we do have a former president who does sort of off-campus ventriloquy, telling the Republicans, don't pass that bipartisan bill that would actually make a difference. Wait till I get there. It's kind of the Superman thing.
That bill would have sent a lot of actual resources
It
to
would
the
have
border.
really, been a better solution than this, but it's ridiculous to think, it's ridiculous to think that the Democrats aren't going to respond to this, that they should say, oh, well, we'll just wait for Trump to get here. Do people know what Donald Trump is talking about doing? He's talking about deporting folks already here, detention camps, rounding up undocumented immigrants and sending them back. You have to think practically. That's all I'm saying is I just kind of wish the Congresswoman would be on the team.
I think that she does have a good point, though, where Democrats do have a tendency to run
She
against...
Jayapal or she Joni Balter?
Sorry, Jayapal.
Yes.
Has a good point in that Democrats do kind of tend to run against themselves. And Democrats will never be better Republicans than Republicans. And I think that strategy ends up backfiring a lot because they're not bringing in any Republicans. They're just, being Republicans for no reason.
Yeah, I think the Biden that we're seeing with this executive order just feels like a far cry from the 2020 era Biden who ran on a pro-immigration platform that focused on expanding legal immigration pathways, rolling back the U.S. immigration detention regime, and just trying to address some of those root causes of this migration. And what we're getting is just, Biden cosplaying a Republican. But while doing so, that alienates, I think, a progressive base. And we're seeing Biden alienate that base with this and then with his stances on Gaza and reaction to Israel. And so I just wonder, who is Biden seeing his base as when we go into this election?
So politics, it's often been said, is the art of the possible, not the posturing. You have to make bargains that make you not exactly how you were, 3-4 years ago. Your position changes. The position at the border has changed as well. And we know that because many cities are experiencing this influx of immigrants who, they can't really handle. And so, I see it in sort of the two ways, the policies and also just the sheer politics. This happens to be an election year and you have to talk to voters. And it's better in general if you talk to voters in the middle because those are the ones that go back and forth. Sort of independents, lowercase, libertarians, lowercase. Those are the folks who swing. The rest, everybody else is just in their camps. They're not changing their positions.
Are you saying it's a mistake for Congresswoman Jayapal to criticize Biden? Because I wonder whether could it do, in a way, just now talking still with the politics, does it do some of Biden's work for him, positioning him as the independent one?
Well, I think it's time to get on board the team that's facing the election. So I'm not going to change that position, but I will add, and it's kind of funny what you said, is that some of her comments may have the effect, I thought I saw something on this, of getting Biden to do something in addition. And I don't know exactly what that would be, to do something in addition that would please the progressives.
Yes.
So in that way, maybe it's not as...
I want to hear what you all think, but I was reading about the same thing, that they're maybe looking for some protections for undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. There are various things that progressives on this issue want. And again, I guess in a political season, my mind goes so quickly to the politics, I would think, this is my ignorant take here, that if I'm a Joe Biden advisor, I want this in the headlines every day. You all may disagree, but politically, I guess I'm with Joni thinking that if the story every day is day 2 of the border negotiations between Biden and his progressive wing, he's going to try this, he's going to try to negotiate that and compromise on that the story, most people who aren't paying much attention, you want them to hear, oh, Biden did something about the border over and over. Feel free to disagree.
I mean, I think that he needs to at least court progressives in some way. I mean, people are already calling him Genocide Joe over the Gaza issue. I think that we're not necessarily worried about progressive voters going over to the other side as much as just losing progressive voters altogether.
But that issue of him courting progressives by saying, okay, maybe you're right, maybe we could improve it this way and that way, and that's a narrative all through the summer.
It might leave like less of a bad taste in some people's mouth.
I think that it's just a broader issue with just the Democratic Party. It seems confused about who its base is and who we're doing this for. And I understand that politics is a game. I think to the idea
with serious consequences.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, with my idealist hat on, that's disappointing because I would like politicians to address the issues that they care about and fix the problems in the world. And I know that that's not how the world works, but maybe we're seeing those issues present themselves and we can change them.
Well, too late for this order. We have, for better or worse, we have plenty of people who are in the country. They're looking to settle. They're looking to work. This is happening across the country. This is happening in Washington State. We have hundreds of asylum seekers in King County, some and some from Angola or Congo by way of Brazil and then Mexico. People are coming from all parts of the world, and we've been following the saga of these migrants who were welcomed to initially by a Tukwila church that's long been overcrowded. So they've spread out across the county in tents and in cars and in short-term hotels and Airbnbs, some paid for with donations. There are more than 100 migrants camping right next to a vacant hotel in Kent that the county bought to house people during the pandemic. But either the city of Kent doesn't want the migrants there, or King County doesn't want to spend the money, or both. In any case, they're not in this vacant hotel right next door. And police had said they would clear the camp, but they haven't done that, which could be a Kent police decision, a King County sheriff's decision, and they might be waiting for the state to pay for some of this. Some of that state money might kick in July. What have you all thought of as you've watched this? Hot potato, I guess. Who's going to pay to help?
I mean, it's been hot potato like this whole time, right? Where if you clear encampments and they have nowhere to go or nowhere, comparable to go, then they just go somewhere else, you know.
Yeah, these migrants that I'm talking about now were, many or most of them were recently at a park in Seattle.
Right. And I think that's one, I mean, just as people get priced out of Seattle, people get hot potatoed down to Kent. You know, it's, you have to, I mean, maybe they'll move on to Federal Way if they just get cleared with nowhere to go, you know. People are going to keep existing. It would be great if that money came in and they would have somewhere to sleep.
Yeah, and to that point, I did see that the city of Seattle has housed maybe 130 of the families who were camping in that Central District Park in some hotels, and then
right.
But it's a broader issue, and this is hitting a lot of sanctuary cities across the U.S. And I know in Chicago, they have spent nearly $140 million in 2023 on this issue, and they'll be spending another $150 million this year. New York City has spent nearly $1.5 billion on trying to shelter these migrants. It's an expensive problem because we don't even have, in Seattle and in a lot of these cities, we don't have housing for our own citizens. And not only that, but a lot of these people can't work. They don't have work permits because of how the asylum process works. And then there are language barriers. The system is already inaccessible for English speakers. So this is difficult and expensive. And I don't know, to the point of hot potato, I don't know what happens to who's holding the hot potato next. We need federal funds. We need border policy that is not just what Biden has proposed.
But that's exactly why Biden had to do something, because the cities throughout the country are really struggling with this. And if you watch just this recent dust up, I guess, between King County and Kent, you know, I've never seen so much finger pointing. You enforce. No, you enforce. Well, I won't enforce till you enforce. Sounds great. What we really need is a solution there. And even a solution will just be momentary if we don't do something at the border. But, you know, clearly the money isn't there. They would continue to put the folks into the motel nearby. And so I guess what's going to have to happen here is some kind of a coordinated effort, public, private, state, local, to, I don't know, Zoom, sit in the same room, whatever you prefer, and figure this out. And so they are going to need to figure out which money source there is. The state provided some money. I don't remember exactly how much it was. But there are ways to make this work rather than just saying, I don't know who's enforcing this. They've got to be a little more sophisticated than that, one hopes.
Maybe a public campaign to ask our many millionaires to help asylum seekers, which I bring up because this week a wealth management firm reported that Seattle ranks number 2 for millionaire density. 1 in every 14 people in the city is a millionaire, which this firm defines as having $1 million in, quote, investable wealth, which only includes listed company holdings, cash holdings, and debt-free residential property holdings. Debt-free, I don't know if that means they're counting people's home equity if they're not debt-free, but home equity of, you know, $500,000 I think is pretty common in Seattle. Now, I do not trust any one survey or study. I'm very reluctant to take these numbers very seriously, but, you know, it's a lot of money. We know that already. What was your reaction to this? How do you think all the wealth here, so what? How has it affected our city?
Well, just to be clear here, we're talking about millionaire density, not dense millionaires, right? To be clear.
The density per, yes, millionaires per thousand or however, yes.
Per capita.
Number of, I'm trying to be funny. Sorry.
I cannot confirm the density of millionaires. I can't confirm
How many
or deny
parts
that.
of millionaires per million?
I was trying to be funny. Okay. So my reaction is, in some ways, this has been trending this way since Microsoft started minting millionaires, 20, 30 years ago. Amazon comes in and adds to it. It's good for the tax base and the businesses, you know, restaurants, services. They want people who have money to start spending it or continue spending it. It's obviously terrible for income inequality, housing. You know, you saw that story this week that said the average King County home is now about $1 million. Seattle's not far behind.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, every new millionaire that's trying to buy a house is probably blocking someone else who was working their head off trying to be able to afford just a down payment. You know, I can't decide if one of the questions that we were presented with was are we humble or are we arrogant about our wealth? Well, it's hard to generalize about that, but it is true that for the longest time, the wealthy people here were not showy about it. We're Seattle, not Dallas.
Or
right?
maybe we're covert.
Covert, yes.
Yeah.
Covert.
The millionaires among us.
Yes. The wider LLC. And I feel like, especially the transition that we're having right now, it's really hard not to bring up that they could be better for the tax base, right? We could.
How would they do that?
It could be taxed.
They could be taxed.
Yeah, progressive revenue.
This is what it keeps coming down to, and we're like, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for this? The one thing that really, really is always an issue is that we have very few avenues for progressive taxation. And in Washington, it's so entrenched that it would require a lot of doing to be able to have more avenues of progressive taxation. I mean, you even whisper the word capital gains, and there's an entire, mailer campaign that just gets ejected from the state GOP about how they want to take away all your money or all the millionaires are going to move away. I feel like we have enough millionaires now that they're not going to.
Yeah, they're here to stay.
Right.
But on the subject of the capital gains tax, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Go for it.
But that seemed to be pretty successful. I mean, it raised $898 million in just 1 year. And that was on taxing 7% on bonds and stocks that surpass $250,000. And there's a ton of exceptions in there. So that shows me that there's a ton of wealth in not only our city, but our state.
Right. And did anyone move away when
they didn't tell me that.
Calling Jeff Bezos.
Well, he paid about half the
moved,
capital gains, and now he's departed.
Yes.
But also, I kind of want to quibble friendly, with you about that these folks aren't being taxed. They are being taxed. We do have a capital gains tax. It is now the subject of an initiative this fall to roll it back. We have a payroll tax. We have many property tax levies for all kinds of things. For families and education levy, which no one's going to be against. For transportation, another kind of a whopper sized one. For housing, we do tax people.
But we're taxing everybody for those. I think the issue here is that the tax system is regressive. So whereas the millionaires are paying a certain amount, so are the non-millionaires.
I think that the problem that we have here is we keep on having the list is so long is because we can't have an income tax.
Yeah,
and the state legislature just voted that.
Yep.
Regarding one of the initiatives.
So we won't have one.
Yes, a ban. Before we take a break, since we're talking about local, national politics meshing together, the current Republican frontrunner for governor is a former member of Congress, Dave Reichert, who has been asked many times, are you voting for Trump? And he has refused to answer the question. Well, this week, the Seattle Times posted a recording of him made back in March telling a group of Republicans, and as you'll hear, apparently hoping that there were no reporters there, telling a group of Republicans why he's not answering the Trump question. It turns out it is the media's fault.
The media is looking for me to make a statement about Trump. That will be the nail in the coffin. So I am not going to allow the media to divide us from this mission of winning this governor's seat, because what they want to do is they want me to identify with a certain presidential candidate that is not popular in this state. As soon as I do that, I lose that opportunity to win over some of those 25% of those undecided voters. So someone asked me, will you vote for him? And I said, what's my head doing?
His head was nodding.
Okay, so if you see in the newspaper is, there are reporters here.
I hope there are no reporters here. So it's clearly the media's fault for asking a question. Here's my question to you. What drives away more voters? Saying you will vote for your party's nominee or evading the question?
I think
in this case.
I think it's both, and I hope there are no reporters here when I say this.
No, no.
But,
Off the record. No.
Yeah, this is off the. This is between you and
this is
the
just
four of
between
us.
a couple of us here. You don't quote me, reporters. Icky. It seems like Dave Reichert's trying to be two people at the same time. The one behind closed doors at a fundraiser, a Republican gathering, and the one that's running for office. And so, to answer your question, I think voters here really dislike a lack of transparency. Who are you? It's a fair question to ask. Do you support the person at the top, the person likely to be at the top of your ticket? It's a fair question. Needs an answer. It's not wink, wink. What's my head doing? Is it nodding or that? And then the other, so he loses, I think he loses on both counts from this coming out. I don't know how big. I actually think this is going to be a very close race, reminiscent of, say, 2012, the last time the governor's seat was open, 3-point race at that time. But also, remember, this is a plus 20, as the political folks say, Biden state. So people here really are not going to support somebody who's with Trump and saying, I'm aligned with Trump. I think it, nice tap dance, but it didn't work out, I don't think, that well.
Yeah. I think the fence sitting was helpful for the moderates he's trying to court, but by doing his coy little nod that was caught on camera and then circulated on recording and circulated to the Seattle Times, that's going to alienate some of these people who are anti-Trump. I also you got to throw in a little joke, Joni. My joke is that I just think it's funny that former King County Sheriff Dave Reichert, who's running on a law and order platform, couldn't publicly say whether he would vote for a convicted felon for president.
Right. And I mean, on the sheriff point, right? Like the last time he was asking for a new political position, it was a much, much different political environment. He was coming out of a nonpartisan office. He was able to kind of coast on the Green River Killer thing, which is a big bipartisan issue, is no serial killers.
Yes.
Right.
Much agree.
I'm with you.
Right.
I am so
endorsed.
Yeah. And I mean, and the media environment was much different then, too. I mean, it's not the media's fault. The media ask political candidates questions about their political positions. That's what we do. Right. People want to know, clearly. But I mean, his strategy just has to be much different. And I'm not sure that, he was wholly prepared to come in there with a new strategy now that, it's been a very long time since he was sheriff. And
just tell us the truth is all I say. What is your position on gay marriage? I would like to know it. I would like to know.
There you go, being divisive again.
Right.
Typical media. One more thing before we take a break is one more political story. June is Pride Month. The city of Newcastle has decided not to fly the Pride flag, which they did. They did fly it last year. This week, the city council decided not to do it this time in a 4-3 vote. King 5 News had the sound of the mayor of Newcastle, Robert Clerk, explaining his no vote.
So if we say you have to support this because we proclaimed it, but certain people in the community say no, then we're disservicing a portion of the community.
The mayor said that his stance is just no proclamations that he took when he took office. He said no proclamations of any kind. So is he right that flying a flag that some of his constituents don't like is disservicing them? Is that fair?
What really strikes me about this is, as you pointed out, they flew this flag last year. And some of the statements he made that we didn't hear just now are that he's worried that if you fly this flag, then you're going to have to fly like every flag that people want. So he mentioned we'd have to put up a MAGA flag, or what about a Hamas flag? And that cognitive jump to connecting a pride flag with extreme politics is really telling to me. It signals to me a worrisome ideology that is trending in Pride Month this year. I don't know if you all heard about Poulsbo, Washington last week. A bunch of people, or somebody slashed all of the pride flags in Poulsbo. And then a couple weeks ago, the FBI and Homeland Security issued domestic travel warnings about the possible dangers of going to pride events. People around Seattle are beefing up security like they never have before for Pride. Being queer in this country and celebrating that feels dangerous because of the charged rhetoric across the country. And I know that the Newcastle thing is small, but that small decision really makes me think that this broader charged environment is what caused it.
It's indicative of a larger issue, for sure.
Well, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
Oh, not exactly.
Well, sorry, I kind of did, but I wasn't sure. What should the criteria be about a proclamation and a flag? Is it the politics of the city council, of the mayor, of the voters? How should that decision be made? Because you used the example of the MAGA flag and said, well, we shouldn't equate Pride Month with political extremism, I think. But to some people who say, make America great again, they don't think that they're being extremist. So how does a local government handle that?
I mean, it would be great if queer identity wasn't inherently politicized by local governments. I think that the personal is political, like we've all heard that before. But I mean, it would be nice if people that just kind of want to celebrate who they are just in their core identity didn't have to make it a whole political campaign, right? Like.
But yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Let me give one more example.
Yeah.
So remember the debate over flying the American flag at sporting events and how you should respond to that. And some people said it's just a flag. It's just about unity. But the way it is, and there are political policies that can flow from your support for the LGBTQ community. So some people are going to see that as an inherently political statement. Just like some people said, no, the American flag is a very political statement. There's no getting at. In other words, people will interpret how they interpret. So how does a local government navigate? Or should they not? Should they just, proclaim and fly whatever the city council wants and don't apologize for it? This is your take on your city's values.
I mean, I think that people do need to reevaluate what their values are. I think people need to stand firm in their values. And I think, there's a lot of political discourse right now that is kind of wavering people away from their values. Or, maybe they are really showing their values and that's a problem. I don't know.
Well, so there's no law that says you have to fly the pride flag. To me, it was always just a supportive, inclusive, Northwest national thing to do. And we should point out that the Newcastle vote comes at a time when there's a national effort to kind of make the pride flags controversial, to tell people you can't. We have to do these things in the context in which they occur. There is another side to this. And it came up in the campus protest, you'll remember, and this is a move that was led by the University of Chicago, and actually Harvard University, after much trouble, adopted this. And it's the idea that universities and governments should not take positions on divisive national and international issues.
But as you say, it depends on what are we calling divisive and why. Yeah.
Well, this one has sort of purposely become
I'm going to be divisive because I'm the mean timekeeper and we've got to take a break.
So
a couple of things. Number one, I thought it was, it doesn't matter how you feel, the move of someone taking those in Poulsbo, those shredded flags, and instead of just trying to fix them up, reflying them and posting them with pink yarn, emphasizing where the tears happened. I thought that was
really cool.
Beautiful response. And I'll just say that today, atop the Space Needle, maybe as we're speaking, the city of Seattle is hoisting the rainbow pride flag. We are going to take a short break here on Week in Review and come back with more news of the week to cover, so don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books. Sci-fi duo James S.A. Corey launched the first book in a new series, The Mercy of the Gods, Saturday, August 10th at 7 p.m. Tickets available now at thirdplacebooks.com.
I'm Julian Marshall, host of BBC NewsHour. On today's programme, the US Sudan envoy tells us the civil war in Sudan could become a 7- or 8-sided conflict, sucking in neighbouring countries, and the mysterious plague that's already wiped out sea urchins in the Red Sea and is spreading.
Stay with us for BBC NewsHour this afternoon at 1, right after Week in Review here on 94.9 KUOW.
Support for KUOW comes from Cambium Landscapes. Since 1998, working with clients' tastes and home architecture to create landscapes that complement their outdoor lifestyles, whether relaxing in the spa, dining al fresco, or playing pickleball. Portfolio at cambiumlandscape.com.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review. You can watch the show too. We're live streaming it on YouTube. I'm Bill Radke. I'm with my panel this week, freelance journalists Nathalie Graham and Sarah Anne Lloyd, and Joni Balter are my panelists. Sarah waved at you. Thank you. And let's talk about this. Psychedelics have gotten more popular as alternative treatments for mental health. The University of Washington is studying the use of psychedelics to treat addiction. The New York Times said recently, a few years ago now, the illegal drug ecstasy was poised to be one of the hottest new therapeutics since Prozac. But this week, an FDA advisory panel said no to using ecstasy to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, which millions of Americans suffer from. And some of my panelists here, you reacted to that. What was your interest in this FDA advisory panel move against MDMA, Molly, ecstasy?
I think for me it comes from there's just been this, it feels like a crescendo of interest and possibility around using drugs and combining them with therapy. MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, ketamine, all that sort of thing. And we're specifically in a lot of these studies talking about using them to help with PTSD, specifically in veterans. And it felt kind of like a sure thing. I don't know if this is just my naivete, but it just sort of felt like, oh, okay, like we're here now. We criminalized these types of drugs in the 70s. It's time to reschedule them and start researching them and seeing how they can actually help our lives become better. And so I think this is not like a definitive no yet from the FDA, but it sort of signals this hesitance from them. And so that to me struck some alarm bells.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what would be great about MDMA is if we had more clinical data on it that was in a supervised medical setting. And I think that they're saying they don't want to do that. One of the reasons they cited was it can raise blood pressure and pulse in some of the people that were evaluated before the decision. But that sounds to me like a great reason to use it under medical supervision, not necessarily to not do it. And one of the biggest issues with MDMA safety is that it's cut with other stuff, right? Which it also would not be in a clinical setting.
Yes.
Right.
That's my understanding.
It's the other stuff sometimes that's the biggest problem. I welcome any new treatment that helps people with many of these mental health challenges. I've never tried ecstasy. I've done a few other things, unlike Bill Clinton. But,
okay. We're going to spend the next hour on that, so stay tuned.
I think we should. So I have no idea what it's like, but if there's a way to take some of these drugs out of the darkness and put them to good use, who's not for that? And for that reason, I love that the UW is studying mushrooms. I can imagine them being helpful in a controlled environment, but we don't know. So all I want to do on these is know more, and if they can be. I mean, I do think high blood pressure could be a real problem, and the cardiac stuff. They have to do it in a safe environment, but open to it like crazy.
Yeah, and on that UW study, that sort of comes from the legislature's attempts to legalize mushrooms in the state, and part of that was let's do a study on it, and so that's what that UW study is maybe paving the way for. And I think if the FDA were to signal like, hey, we're cool with MDMA, then it might become easier for Washington to legalize magic mushrooms.
Well, a final FDA decision on MDMA, as I said, also known as ecstasy or Molly, that's expected in mid-August. So we'll see. Let's see how many other stories we can get through before this show wraps up. Just some quick headlines. The so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, a voter initiative, took effect this week. It outlines rights for parents to oversee their kids' school records and materials. A court commissioner had rejected a request to stop that from becoming law. The ACLU said it's going to reduce confidentiality for students, undermine support for LGBTQ youth, The Attorney General's office said those harms are speculative. Also this week, Microsoft is under antitrust scrutiny. Federal Trade Commission investigating Microsoft and OpenAI's role in the artificial intelligence boom. Have they behaved like monopolies? One more law taking effect. Law enforcement now has more leeway again to chase suspects in vehicles. That happened this week. They can pursue a fleeing suspect when there's reasonable suspicion they violated the law. Up to now, they could only chase for reasonable suspicion of a violent offense, sex offense, vehicular assault, domestic violence, an escape, or driving under the influence because of concern that high-speed chases are dangerous.
Well, they are dangerous, and we do have a lot of highway and pedestrian deaths, so that's one side of it.
The last time I was on here, we were discussing a pedestrian death from a high-speed chase.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's
But on the other hand, I do think that once you took this tool away from law enforcement, you had folks that were really driving fast, driving the wrong way, driving erratically, that really needed to be stopped, and we shouldn't have handcuffed those folks.
Finally, I want to make sure we get in our, we promise we have a sacred vow with our listeners to talk about something at the end of the show that made us smile. So I want to make sure we have time for that. For one thing, I have a little bit of audio to play you. My nominee is, we were talking about electricity demand rising in Washington State recently. One of the problems is how to store solar and wind electricity when the sun's not shining, wind not blowing. And the current batteries are expensive, and they're lithium, and they're limited. Well, a Week in Review listener called me to give me a tip.
Finland is working on sand batteries. They're a giant heat battery. You hook them up to a steam generator. Now, what could be, more ecological than sand and water?
I don't know what's more ecological than sand and water. The listener's correct. You know how hot a sandy beach gets in summertime? Unless you've never left Seattle, you wouldn't know. But other people know, and that sand stays hot a long time. Well, researchers in Finland are storing solar and wind power for months at a time in sand batteries. 100 tons of builders' sand in a silo, and they use that in the winter to heat homes or indoor swimming pools, which I know because the BBC sent a reporter to a Finnish swimming pool, and in he dove.
I'm here in the municipal swimming pool in Kankanpää in western Finland. It's a beautiful pool, very balmy all year round. But the heat that's in here comes from a rather surprising source, from sand. What made you think that this might actually work? I mean, it's a bit of a left field idea.
It's a bit strange, but it's cheap, it's easy to get, and you can get to really high temperatures, maybe 500 degrees, while with water you can only get to 100. So you get a lot of heat stored in a small space.
The Finns now plan to massively expand their sand system, making it 1,000 times bigger.
The developers say this could solve the problem of year-round supply. Of course, that is what developers would say about it. But I'm hopeful, and hope makes me smile. That's why I'm telling you about it. One little final problem is the sand is good for holding heat energy, but you can't store electricity in sand very well. That would, of course, be much more efficient. They're working on that.
Can I just say, those darn Finns, they are the happiest country on earth for the 7th year in a row. And this is the kind of stuff that's going to make them happier than us.
Yep, they're keeping toasty. Anything else worth smiling about?
I'm really excited about the free fares for youth on Amtrak. I think it's cool for a lot of reasons. I think that historically we viewed like car culture as a really big milestone for independence, and I think that this kind of helps chip away at that a little bit.
At what age are kids free? Do you know?
So it's they can ride by themselves, I believe, at 16. They can, but at 13 they can have a free fare if they're riding with a paid adult.
Got it. Thank you.
But yeah, so it gets them out in the world after the loneliness pandemic. Making travel more accessible for families with less money. I think all around it's really great.
What else?
Did this have to be news related? The things that make me smile?
Oh, now I'd like to know. What smile
Just
worthy
the way
to
you smiled when you said
Yeah,
that.
you are smiling.
Look, I can't help. I smile a lot. But no, I saw the movie The Fifth Element for the first time at the Central Cinema. And
Is the fifth element sand that
No,
holds electricity?
I think it might be, spoiler alert, love.
But it's stored in like a weird column.
Well, in a person, actually.
Right. a person and then also
But it was so weird and campy, and Bruce Willis at his best. And I had a great time. So go to the Central Cinema.
Okay, Central Cinema and Amtrak. Two smileys.
I got to
Yes,
add the
Joni.
Seattle Mariners to the pile. First place for a month. Won 9 of their last 11 games. And you never used to be able to say this about the Mariners, but that pitching, oh my.
Yeah.
Too many aces.
I think the fifth element might be Brian Wu, starting pitcher.
Nicely done.
Yeah. Oh, I have just enough seconds to tell you selfishly that KUOW just got honored with 5 Public Media Journalists Association awards and 20 Society for Public Journalists Excellence in Journalism awards. It's almost not fair. So all those things made me smile, and as did your presence, Joni Balter, political analyst, contributing columnist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Anne Lloyd, freelance writer, editor. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Nathalie Graham, I'm glad you're writing the Playdate column in The Stranger and all the other freelance journalism you're doing.
Thanks, me
Thank
too.
you for coming. And I want to thank you to my colleagues. We've got Week in Review producer Kevin Kniestet. We've got social media and live streaming help from Juan Pablo Chiquiza. Additional support from Hans Twite and Bernard Willett. Always makes it sound great. I'm Bill Radke. I'm looking forward to a date with you in 1 week.